My coffee tastes like nothing today.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. It's just warm sadness in a mug.
Oh, no. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all you Sip&Talkers out there, no matter where you are. Welcome back.
Welcome.
Are you suffering from anosmia? You know, the loss of smell? Because that, funnily enough, kind of brings me right to our topic today.
It's a perfect setup.
It is. And if you haven't listened to our last chat, EP522, you really should go back. We talked all about narrative control, how memories of things like Tiananmen or Hong Kong can be, well, erased.
We had that one listener from China who wrote in asking if his memories were even real.
Yes, asking if his brain had been, like, chipped. He was genuinely asking us, did these things actually happen?
And of course, we stick to the facts here. But, you know, after we aired that show, we got a lot of feedback. And a few listeners pointed something out that we ourselves realized. We had this huge black hole.
A giant one.
We talked about rewriting narratives, and we completely skipped the single biggest global event of the last 5 years.
COVID-19.
The Wuhan pneumonia. And just for the record, I don't have anosmia now, but I definitely did when I had COVID, and it was absolutely miserable. But it feels like a lot of people have forgotten just how bad it was, you know?
Oh, totally. You didn't even remind me we missed it. I got home, was in the shower, and it just hit me. Oh, my God. We forgot the pandemic.
The biggest one.
The biggest one. And, you know, time flies. If you look at official reports out of China now, 2020 in Wuhan just sounds like a regular flu season. Like everyone just waved goodbye and it was over.
It's this memory disappearance magic. It feels more powerful than Thanos' snap in Marvel movies.
It really does. I almost forgot about it myself, which is terrifying.
Exactly. So today, our mission is to complete that forgotten puzzle. We're going to analyze how the narrative got shifted from, you know, whistleblowers disappearing to these huge fights over the virus's origin.
And finally landing on this great power anti-pandemic success story.
Right. The logic and the methods behind it, they really deserve a closer look. So get your coffee ready. We're going to do a full inventory.
Let's get into it. Today's talk, Memory 404, fighting the delete key of CCP's COVID-19 history.
Okay, so before we get into how the story was rewritten, we have to anchor ourselves in reality. Because when you look back now, 2020 feels so abstract, like a bad dream.
We have to establish the stakes. Because if you forget how massive the disaster was, then the victory they're claiming doesn't seem all that suspicious.
It seems normal.
Exactly. Let's start with the financial impact, which was just astronomical.
So just the raw numbers. In 2020 alone, the entire global GDP, it contracted by 3.3%.
That's one of the biggest economic shocks since the Great Depression. It's huge.
And when you put that in dollar terms, you're looking at a direct loss of about 7.4 trillion US dollars.
7.4 trillion.
To put that into perspective for you, that is 4 times the entire combined GDP of sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow.
It's like an economic black hole just opened up and sucked the growth out of the entire planet.
And it wasn't a quick rebound either. The IMF, you know, they talked about this scarring effect. They predicted that even through 2024, global output would still be 2 or 3 percentage points lower than where it should have been.
So we're still paying for it. That inflation, the supply chain issues, a lot of that is the ripple effect.
Absolutely. And that's just the money, the human cost. That's where the numbers get really complicated and, honestly, much darker.
Right, because the official number you always hear from the WHO is about 7.1 million deaths globally as of 2025.
But we all know that's a severe undercount, right? I mean, different countries have different ways of reporting, and a lot of deaths from, say, a collapsed healthcare system didn't get counted as COVID deaths.
Which is why experts look at this other metric, excess deaths. And this is where it gets really staggering.
Yes. So excess deaths, for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically comparing how many people actually died during that period versus how many were expected to die based on previous years.
It captures the full impact of the crisis.
And when you look at the models from places like the WHO or The Economist, the number just explodes.
Yeah.
The estimates range from 14.9 million all the way up to maybe 36 million deaths.
So potentially 5 times the official number.
5 times. So when we talk about a victory narrative, you have to remember, it's a victory that's built on top of the erased memory of tens of millions of people.
And then there's the invisible burden, the people who lived long COVID.
Oh, this is a huge one. We're not just talking about a cough that lingers. A massive meta-analysis recently showed that up to 36% of adults who got the virus developed long COVID.
1 in 3.
1 in 3. And we're talking about debilitating symptoms, brain fog, chronic fatigue, memory issues, things that are still impacting the workforce and our healthcare systems today.
So that's the backdrop, an immense global trauma. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Wuhan, early 2020. How did the CCP manage to take what was clearly an institutional failure and spin it into a heroic story?
It's their classic crisis management to propaganda playbook. In those first critical days and weeks, the default response was suppression.
We all remember Dr. Late Wenlian.
Exactly. The New York Times did a big investigation on this in 2020. Officials actively shut down the alarms he and other doctors were raising. He was just in a private chat group with medical colleagues.
And on January 3rd, the police detained him, forced him to sign a letter saying he was spreading rumors.
That one act didn't just silence a doctor. It basically turned off the world's early warning system the worst possible moment.
And the censorship was immediate, right?
Oh, it's mechanical. Groups like Citizen Lab tracked it. On platforms like Weibo and WeChat, keywords like Li Wenliang or Wuhan unknown pneumonia were being filtered almost instantly.
It was a game of whack-a-mole. I remember people started using code. They called the 4 top officials in Wuhan the F4, like the boy band, to try and get around the censors.
And even that got blocked within hours. But then, everything changed. On February 7th, Dr. Li tragically died from the virus.
And the public reaction was just explosive. Grief and pure rage online.
It was a massive outpouring. You saw slogans like, "We want freedom of speech." The CCP realized they couldn't just keep deleting his name. They had to acquire his narrative.
They had to recycle it.
Perfectly put. The speed was incredible. He was posthumously declared a martyr.
Right. And the police who reprimanded him, they were blamed for making a mistake.
A local mistake, yes. But crucially, the official statements immediately started emphasizing that Lim was a loyal party member who made a noble sacrifice for the nation.
That is just a masterclass in political jujitsu. They didn't deny he existed, they just confiscated his identity. He went from being a whistleblower to a fallen hero of the state.
And that pivot was key. It absorbed the public's anger and gave them a martyr to build the next story around. Suddenly, the narrative shifted to the superiority of the whole nation's system.
The Zhongguo Trio.
Right. State media started framing the Wuhan lockdown not as a desperate act after a cover-up, but as this heroic collective sacrifice that bought the world precious time.
So the whole painful process gets scrubbed. All that's left is the image of building those massive hospitals in, 10 days?
Exactly. They erase the failure and leave only the glorious result. And to do that, they had to erase the memories of what their own citizens went through during the nightmare of Dynamic Zero.
Right. Let's get into that period, because this is the part that is being most actively erased right now. The years of Dynamic Zero. This policy was, for a long time, politically untouchable.
The measures were so extreme, they're hard for most people outside of China to even comprehend. We're talking about a level of state control that was, honestly, terrifying.
I mean, the first thing that always comes to my mind is them sealing people's doors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not just locking them. We saw videos and reports of officials in white hazmat suits physically welding apartment doors shut or boarding them up.
It's literal imprisonment in your own home. And you hear these horror stories of elderly people with medical conditions, trapped inside, unable to get emergency care.
Or even just food and water. It led to completely preventable deaths.
And that kind of brings us to the forced isolation policies. And one event that just crystallizes the whole thing for me, the Guizhou bus crash.
September 2022. That tragedy was just. It showed the complete disregard for human life in pursuit of this zero number.
Can you just remind everyone what happened?
Of course. A bus was forcibly transporting dozens of people to a quarantine facility hundreds of miles away in the middle of the night, and it crashed on the highway.
27 people died.
27 people died. And for what? So some local official could report 0 cases in their district. The survivors said they were just herded out of their homes like they weren't even people.
It's just so chilling. And all of this was happening while there were huge questions about the real death toll, especially around the rapid cremation policy.
Yeah, absolutely. In the peaks of 2020 and again in late 2022, there were official orders for simplified, quick funerals. And at the same time, you had satellite imagery and reports showing crematoriums running 247.
Which fueled this massive suspicion, both inside and outside China, that the numbers were being cooked.
Of course. And this physical crisis, this control, it led directly to the next level of chaos, which was the supply chain collapse and, frankly, starvation.
The Shanghai lockdown in 2022.
The ultimate fiasco. You have one of the most modern, wealthiest cities on the planet, and its people were starving for weeks.
The reports from there were just visceral. People were posting online about having to eat grass from the public green belts.
Just to get some nutrients. And at the same time, you had this massive black market emerge. Relief supplies were being hoarded by officials, left to rot in warehouses, or sold at insane prices.
That infamous report of a watermelon selling for $100 US.
$100. In a city where people were literally starving. And that desperation, that anger, it eventually boiled over into these acts of protest.
The Iron Pot protest.
Yes. It was so powerful because it was so simple. In cities like Chengdu, you had millions of people under lockdown. And they just went to their windows at a set time and started banging pots and pans.
Just this wave of sound across the city, a protest against hunger that you couldn't easily censor.
All of this, all these different incidents, they built up and finally hit a breaking point.
The white paper movement.
That was the moment. It was sparked by that tragic fire in a lockdown apartment building in Urumqi. People started holding up blank sheets of A4 paper. A silent protest against censorship and the inhumanity of the policy.
And the government's response was shocking.
It was shark treatment. They just dropped it. Suddenly, with no warning, no preparation, dynamic zero was over.
Which, of course, led to this massive, uncontrolled wave of infections and deaths, all happening behind a complete wall of data secrecy.
You couldn't get real numbers on anything.
And now, today, the official party line is that they achieved a major, decisive victory in epidemic prevention and control.
It's that pattern again, right? You mentioned it before. It's the same logic as after Tiananmen Square in 1989.
Yeah.
You don't debate. You don't remember the messy parts. You just skip the entire painful process and declare victory. China wins again.
It's so audacious. It's like rewriting a chess game by only showing the final checkmate and pretending you didn't almost lose your queen on the fifth move.
Which brings me to my favorite analogy for this.
The scorned ex-boyfriend.
The scorned ex. Okay, so imagine you catch your boyfriend cheating. Here's how the narrative rewrite plays out step by step.
Okay, I'm ready.
Step 1, silence. He turns off his phone, avoids your calls, tells his friends you're crazy. That's the initial information suppression.
Classic.
Step 2, disorder. He finally talks, but he blames the other girl. Says she seduced him, it was all her fault. That's the Fort Detrick counter-narrative, shifting the blame.
Ah, yes, the blame game.
Step 3, the solution. Right when you're about to dump him, he shows up with a huge bouquet of flowers and says, look how hard I fought to save our relationship.
That's the great collective sacrifice narrative.
Exactly. And then the final outcome. 2 years later, you're at dinner, and he says, you know, our relationship is so strong now because of my loyalty and how I handled that difficult time.
Oh my God, it's painfully accurate.
That's the power of rewriting the narrative. You just erase the cheating, erase the pain, and all that's left is the story of his incredible faithfulness. And that control wasn't just internal, it spilled out onto the world stage.
Yeah, let's shift to the international dimension because this thing turned from a health crisis into a geopolitical brawl almost immediately.
It really did. And the weapons weren't just the virus. They were masks, vaccines, and the right to even ask questions.
You saw this split personality, right? On one hand, China was doing what they called mask diplomacy, sending aid. But on the other, they were engaging in some serious geopolitical obstruction.
And the clearest, most damaging example of that was the campaign to block Taiwan from getting vaccines.
This was the BioNTech scandal.
Exactly. This is playing out in late 2020, early 2021. Taiwan had a deal worked out directly with the German company, BioNTech, to buy 5 million doses.
A Chinese company, Shanghai Fosun Pharma, had the exclusive distribution rights for what they called the Greater China region.
And under pressure from Beijing, they stepped in and killed the deal. Taiwan's president at the time was explicit about it, saying it was direct interference from the Chinese government.
So they were weaponizing a life-saving vaccine for political leverage.
100%. It left Taiwan in a really dangerous position with a massive vaccine shortage. But this is where the countermove was so interesting.
This is where Taiwan's allies stepped up.
Yes, and they framed it very clearly as support for democracy. You saw these political vaccines arriving.
Japan was a huge help, right? They donated nearly 4 million doses.
They were, and the U.S. sent 2.5 million Moderna doses. But what was really interesting was the support from Central and Eastern Europe.
Poland, Lithuania, the Czech Republic.
Exactly. Poland sent 400,000 doses. Lithuania, Czechia, Slovakia.
Yeah.
They all sent shipments. These weren't huge numbers globally, but symbolically, it was a massive deal. It was a direct bypass of Chinese pressure.
And Lithuania, especially, paid a heavy economic price for that later on.
They certainly did. But while that was happening, there was another darker form of international engagement going on.
The Great Medical Supply Sweep.
The Australian medical supply plunder, as some called it. This was happening in early 2020. At the same time, China was still delaying its official notification to the WHO.
So they knew it was coming.
It certainly looks that way. State-owned or state-directed Chinese companies in Australia, mostly big property developers, were reportedly ordered by Beijing to sweep the globe for PPE.
And we're not talking about a few boxes of masks.
Not at all. We're talking about chartering planes to airlift dozens of tons of supplies, medical gowns, millions of gloves out of places like Sydney and back to China.
Which created critical shortages in Australian hospitals just as the pandemic was about to hit them.
It was devastating for them. The Australian Medical Association was sounding the alarm, saying their supply chains were collapsing. It suggests a pretty cynical strategy.
Delay the warning to the world, use that window to corner the global market on essential supplies, and then you're in a position of strength.
It's a stark contrast. On one hand, public donations. On the other, aggressive state-directed hoarding.
So given all this and the trillions in economic damage we talked about, it's no surprise that people started demanding accountability.
The calls were loud, especially from some U.S. politicians. President Trump was calling for $10 trillion in reparations. But actual formal lawsuits between countries are really, really rare.
Because of sovereign immunity.
Right. But there was that one really interesting case at the state level.
The Missouri lawsuit.
Yes. The Missouri Attorney General filed a suit in U.S. federal court against China, alleging damages from the cover-up.
And they actually won a judgment, didn't they?
They did, a default judgment, because China obviously didn't show up to defend itself, and it was for about $24 billion.
Now, you can't really enforce that.
No, sovereign immunity makes it pretty much impossible. But the importance of that case wasn't the money. It was the legal argument.
That the core issue wasn't you created the virus. It was that you broke international law.
Exactly. It was a breach of the international health regulations, specifically Articles 6 and 7, which require countries to report potential global health emergencies immediately and share information openly.
So the charge is that by suppressing Dr. Line and delaying the warning, they cost the world its only chance to contain the virus.
That's the fundamental accusation. And it's that fight over the truth that leads us right into the final battleground, the war over the virus's origins.
Okay, so this battle over where the virus came from, it might be the most politicized scientific question of our lifetime.
The reason it's so politicized is because it's not being driven by science. It's being driven by a lack of data, a deliberate lack of data.
The biggest issue has always been China's refusal to allow a truly transparent investigation. The WHO wanted to do a second phase investigation, and Beijing just said no.
And critics argue that delay was the whole point. It gave them time to clean up.
Like at the Huanan seafood market. It was shut down on January 1st, 2020, and then immediately and very thoroughly disinfected.
Which is great for stopping an outbreak, but it's terrible for science. You literally washed away all the evidence, all the samples you'd need to trace the virus's early path.
And then there's the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the WIV. Their database of viral samples was taken offline in late 2019.
And it has never been shared with international investigators. That act in itself is a huge red flag. It doesn't prove a lab leak, but it makes it impossible to disprove one.
It creates a data black hole.
Exactly. And in the face of that pressure, China's response wasn't to provide data, it was to launch a counter-narrative.
The Fort Detrick story.
Yes, this became a talking point for the foreign ministry, blasted out on state media. The idea that the U.S. military brought the virus to Wuhan during the Military World Games in 2019.
And we should be very clear here. There is absolutely no credible public evidence to support that theory.
None. It's pure political deflection.
Yeah.
It's classic whataboutism designed to muddy the waters.
And all this political maneuvering made it incredibly difficult for even the U.S. intelligence community to come to a conclusion.
Right. As of 2025, the official word from the Director of National Intelligence is still that there is no consensus. The community is split.
But there are some leanings, right? The FBI and the CIA were reportedly leaning toward the lab leak hypothesis.
They were, but, and this is a really important caveat, with low confidence.
What does that mean in intel speak?
It means they don't have a smoking gun. They're basing their assessment on indirect circumstantial evidence. Things like the known security gaps at the WIV, reports of sick researchers in late 2019, and that database being shut down.
So the behavior is suspicious, but there's no hard proof.
Exactly. And the scientific consensus is basically the same. The WHO's official report leans toward a natural origin, but stresses that it's impossible to know for sure without China's cooperation.
So the problem isn't a lack of theories, it's a lack of verifiable evidence.
And that lack of evidence is a direct result of political choices. And this effort to control the story extends to erasing the physical and digital reminders of the crisis at home.
You're talking about the dismantling of the Fangkang hospitals.
Yep. Starting in 2023, they began tearing down all those temporary hospitals and even the little PCR testing booths that were on every street corner.
They were the most visible symbols of the lockdown era. Getting rid of them is a form of architectural amnesia. You're physically removing the memory from the landscape.
And then you have the digital purge, which is ongoing. Any content related to the white paper movement, any critical discussion about the lockdowns, it gets deleted.
They're trying to create a narrative vacuum.
And the most insidious part is the academic control. And Nature magazine reported that any Chinese scientist who wants to publish a paper on the origins of COVID has to get it approved by the state council first.
So it's pre-censorship.
It's pre-censorship.
Yeah.
It guarantees that any research that contradicts the official story never even sees the light of day.
So let's just state the central argument here one more time because it's so important. The world isn't really saying China definitely created this virus.
No. What the world is saying is this disaster. If you didn't start it, you absolutely failed to stop it, and then you tried to cover it up.
The cover-up is the crime.
The intentional destruction of the world's chance to contain it. And that's what's so terrifying. The most effective erasure isn't telling a big lie. It's just letting the evidence weather away over time until there's nothing left but the official story.
And the story is always written by the winners.
Which brings us to the final, most important question. Why can't we let ourselves forget this?
So why is it so critical to fight this delete key?
Well, on the most practical level, memory is our early warning system.
Okay.
If we just accept the great victory narrative, it means we're accepting the initial cover-up, the suppression of doctors, the data opacity, as normal.
It's the gray rhino problem, isn't it?
Exactly. A gray rhino is a huge, obvious threat that everyone sees coming, but nobody says anything about. If we forget how this started, we are guaranteed to repeat the same mistakes in the next pandemic. Memory is what builds social resilience.
And there's also the personal aspect. If you don't actively hold on to your own memory of what happened, the fear, the lockdown, the anger, the state can just fill that vacuum with its own story.
Right. Your own lived experience becomes a wrong memory that you're encouraged to correct for the good of the nation. Your suffering gets invalidated.
It's a deeply violating thing.
It is. And finally, and I think this is the most important part, there's the dignity of the victims. The dignity that disappeared. Forgetting is like a second death.
From Dr. Lee to the people who starved in Shanghai to the 27 who died on that bus.
If they are scrubbed from the official history, they vanish completely. Remembering them is the last act of dignity we can offer. Remembering the sound of those pots banging in Chengdu is an act of resistance.
You know, the sheer amount of effort they're putting into rewriting this history is the best evidence we have that the original truth is powerful.
That's a great point. You can always tell when an authoritarian government fears by what it censors.
And it brings up a good rule of thumb for you to think about. When data is messy, contradictory, and all over the place, like it often is in a democracy, it's probably real.
Yeah.
When a story is perfectly clean, uniform, and heroic with no mistakes, it's almost certainly false.
It's just too clean. Our conversation today isn't about pointing fingers just for the sake of it. It's about making sure the future isn't built on a sanitized, pre-approved script.
And we have to talk about it loudly.
We have to, because as long as we keep talking, that memory won't get a 404 error. It's like, if you keep forgetting all the ways your ex cheated on you, you're just doomed to fall into the same trap over and over again. You don't just remember silently, you talk about it.
Sip&Talkers, thank you so much for joining us for this. This was a really crucial follow-up. It was a piece of the puzzle we couldn't leave missing. Our goal here is always to give you a balanced, factual discussion. This isn't about blaming any group of people. It's about stressing the absolute importance of independent thought and transparency, especially when it comes to global health.
Exactly right. And if you enjoy this kind of high-intensity thinking and deep analysis, please remember to subscribe to Sip&Talk. That's the best way to make sure you never miss a conversation.
And you should definitely go check out our good friend Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickytolife. He's got hilarious memes and some amazing travel vlogs that will completely change your mood and show you the beautiful parts of the world.
It's the perfect palate cleanser after a heavy topic like this.
It really is. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.